So let's go ahead and get started. In the news, that's pretty much what it'll be today, for the most part, is the in the news portion. Um, Even though a lot of it's gonna center around specific things, obviously, but it's the hot stuff going on right now or what's happened in the last couple of days. And obviously, the number one thing is going to be the NBA trade deadline. The NBA deadline did come and go yesterday. Anthony Davis did not move, which I'll get to him in a second. But news, I think it was Tuesday or Wednesday that came out. Tuesday, John Wall tore his Achilles in his own house, in obviously an Achilles tear. 12-month rehab. John Wall, the Wizards will be out without John Wall for 12 months because he tore his Achilles at home. I know there's been a lot of tension in the Wizards locker room, it seems like, this year, with him and Bradley Beal, and just the team's expected to be better than they are. But very weird. John Wall tore his Achilles in weird fashion. But yeah, he fell down at home, tore his Achilles, and he's out 12 months. Will most likely miss all of next season as well. It was his left Achilles that he tore in a fall at home, in his own home. But yeah, they discovered the partial tear in just a regular normal procedure on Monday, and obviously they have to completely repair that. That's a bad injury. John Wall, he will be gone for 12 months for the Wizards. Next, you have Enes Kanter from the Knicks. He has been cut. I normally wouldn't talk about somebody being cut like that, but they waived him, cut him, got rid of his $18.6 million, and they couldn't trade it. Well, they didn't get rid of it. They couldn't trade it because nobody wanted to pay it. So they ended up releasing him. And he's had all the stuff going on with the Turkish government where he's from. They're calling him a terrorist. He's saying they're out to get his family. All kind of things like that. Just a very weird situation. But they just traded for DeAndre Jordan just the other day from the Mavs when they sent Porzingis to the Mavericks. And they want to use DeAndre Jordan to teach their younger guys how to play defense and be better as big men in the middle. Kanter had a negative defensive presence, but he was a great rebounder, could score the ball, but he saw his role diminish over the last few weeks. He's been riding the bench. He didn't like it, obviously. Nobody likes to ride the bench when they know they're capable of, or think they're capable of doing more than they're being allowed to do. But so he has been cut by the Knicks. He is gone. But we'll get to the trade deadline stuff now. So Anthony Davis ended up not being traded by the New Orleans Pelicans. Everybody was waiting for that trade to go down, and it never did. Lakers were the big name for him going into that. They tried trading, I think it was 5 or 6 players for him, and it was reported that the Pelicans wanted 6 to 8 draft picks as well as those players. They wanted an absurd amount. They talked about the Celtics possibly going into there, or possibly getting in on that, but the Pelicans wanted too much for him, is what it comes down to, and I think it was too much for him. But the Lakers were literally cleaning out the entire locker room, if you'll say, to try to get Anthony Davis. And New Orleans also wanted all those draft picks. The last, uh, it was a trade package that included initially Brandon Ingram, Kyle Kuzma, Lonzo Ball, and 2 first-round picks. 2 first-round picks in the NBA is great. They were offering 2 picks plus you've got a number 2 overall pick, a number 2 overall pick, and then excuse me, I'm sorry, I don't know where Kuzma was drafted, but he's been a great player. He's been a good role player for the Lakers since he's been there. And then the Lakers also added Josh Hart, who was in his second or third year, played at Villanova, point guard, and Ivica Zubic. Is that how you say that? And the 2 first-round picks. They literally offered the house, and the Pelicans didn't take it. So it was back to square one. Well, the Lakers ended up backing up and saying, "Okay, well, await your counter offer." The Pelicans don't want to let him go. Is what it comes down to. Which I wouldn't want to let go of my All-Star center, my number 1 player either. But he obviously wants out of New Orleans. He's going to sign somewhere else in free agency. And he said himself that he's a 1-year rental if he doesn't go to the Lakers. So they talked about the Clippers possibly getting in on that. They obviously never did. Excuse me, sorry, Intimidator. Hello, good morning. I forgot to respond to you. Excuse me, sorry. But yeah, Anthony Davis, he ended up not being moved at all. They just wanted too much for him. The Celtics, they were passed around as a possible landing spot. The Lakers are obviously the ones going head over heels, diving head first, trying to try to get him. It just didn't work out for either side. And so the Pelicans, they have said that they plan on playing him the rest of the year, which obviously, why wouldn't you? And I think it would be bad for him if he didn't play. If he chose not to play, that would reflect poorly on him. And so he's staying with New Orleans. He's not going anywhere. He'll be a Pelican for the rest of this season, and we'll see where he ends up in the offseason. Next, you had Harrison Barnes, and this one I normally wouldn't talk about either, but it's a situation that happened. Excuse me just a second. During the game, he was in a game for the Mavericks when they traded him to the Kings, and he ended up watching the fourth quarter from the bench after they learned of him being traded. But he was in the game, playing a game, when he learned that he was traded to the Sacramento Kings from the Dallas Mavericks. That's a terrible way to find out. And if he's on the trade, if he's possibly going to be traded, I think you gotta let him know and give him the choice whether to play or not. But they traded him mid-game. Talks might have occurred during the game, none before, but who knows? But a terrible situation. Sucks for him to be playing for a team that just traded you. Obviously, it's a business. You trade who you want in hopes to get who you want. So you can have the team that you want built, but a very poor situation there, a bad situation. Tell somebody, pull him out of the game, something if he's been traded. But if he's but being on the floor in the game with the team, and you've been traded to another, you're officially no longer a part of that team. That sucks. That's an awkward situation. It's a weird situation. They should have told him beforehand that he's possibly going to be traded, or when it's going down, they should get him out of there immediately and give him the choice to leave or not. Obviously, he stayed on the bench. I believe he could have left if he wanted to, but he stayed on the bench for the rest of the game. But he's now in Sacramento and no longer a Dallas Maverick. Next, we got Markelle Fultz. Everybody knows Markelle Fultz for being a number 1 pick, and he's done absolutely nothing since he joined the league. He's battled with shoulder injuries. He's battled with trying to change his shooting technique, specifically at the free throw line. It's nothing against him, but I never really liked him as a number 1 overall pick to begin with. Obviously, the Sixers are going all in for this year to try to put a team to try to win. They traded for Tobias Harris. Obviously, Joel Embiid, Jimmy Butler. Their starting 5 is pretty nice. Ben Simmons, J.J. Redick, Jimmy Butler, Tobias Harris, and Joel Embiid. They've got high quality uh, starting five. They want to they want to make a push, and they want to make it now. It's crazy to see the 76ers go from where they were to last year, and then this year they've been they've been a good team as well, obviously, and they're improving. They've made trades to improve. Markelle Fultz, he's played in 15 games this season, but he's had all the shoulder issues, um, changing his shooting technique, specifically from the free throw line. Like I said, he's terrible at free throws. He's been a bust to this point, but he's been traded to the Orlando Magic. Um, it's a restart for him to go to Orlando. Fresh start, new team, a team that's could sneak into the playoffs with a big run, but they're probably not going to make the playoffs this year. Orlando's been seems like they've been in a constant state of rotation since they um, lost the team that made it to the finals. Those good teams that they had, but they've been searching, they've been trying, and they pick up a former number one overall pick in Markelle Fultz to try to move forward. To try to he gets a fresh start, new team. They hope he can live up to the potential of being. He can live up to being a number one overall pick. They sent a lot in order to get him a first round and a second round, which I wouldn't have done that. I don't think he's worth that at this time. But they wanted their investment back, and they got more. They got a player and 2 picks for Markelle Fultz, but he's in Orlando, so he's now a member of the Orlando Magic. Fresh start for Fultz. Next was Marc Gasol, the longtime Memphis Grizzly. He is finally with a new team. He's with the Toronto Raptors now. And the Raptors, they're making moves to go all in as well. So the Grizzlies did keep Mike Conley, somebody that a lot of people thought they were going to move, but he's obviously their franchise player. But they traded. The Memphis traded Marc Gasol to Toronto, and they got Jonas Valanciunas, DeLon Wright, C.J. Miles, and a 2024 second-round pick. So a decent haul back, a bunch of role players, and a pick that could possibly turn into something in the future. But they wanted to unload Marc Gasol as he gets up there in age. He's still playing well, but Toronto needs a little bit more. Greg Monroe is currently, I believe, their current starting center. But Marc Gasol is still chugging along, still averaging his career averages to this point. But the Raptors, they're looking for more help. Obviously, the 76ers went out for more help. The Bucks, they were pretty quiet. Toronto's got Serge Ibaka as well. So you get a shooter in Marc Gasol. You still have Serge Ibaka, and Valanciunas got traded, but they got a better player in Marc Gasol than obviously their second string of Valanciunas. But Marc Gasol, he's headed to the Toronto Raptors. The Sixers made moves. The Raptors made moves. The Bucks, they're still number one in the conference right now. So everybody made, not everybody, but most of the players, the big time players, made some moves in order to try to stay in the hunt for their league. Some didn't make many moves at all to try to make a playoff push. The Kings, they traded for Harrison Barnes. I believe he could be to help push them to a playoff spot. But we'll go ahead and move on from the NBA trade deadline. It's over and done with. The only thing that'll be happening now is players being cut and things of that fashion. But I wanted to talk about next. I wanted to talk about National Signing Day. National Signing Day was Wednesday for college basketball. not college basketball, college football. Sorry, I'm trying to get it set up here. Uh, nope, wrong one. Let me get it open. Slide over. So, National Signing Day is in the books. Uh, there was a couple of flips. Florida had a good day. Virginia Tech had a good day um, picking up the one of their top lineman recruits. But I'll just go over like the top 25 players here. You got Kayvon Thibodeau. He ended up signing with Oregon. That was already done and over with. Nolan Smith had signed with Georgia. Kenyon Green went to A&M. Evan Neal, number 2 offensive tackle, went to Alabama. Darnell Wright was a signing day get for the Tennessee Volunteers, offensive tackle out of West Virginia. A huge get for Tennessee, but they picked him up on National Signing Day just the other day. He was the number 5 overall recruit. You got Jaden Hazelwood, signed with Oklahoma. Pierce Quick, another highly ranked offensive tackle, signs with Alabama. Owen Papo, that's how I assume you'd say that. Auburn's number 1 recruit in this recruiting class, signed with Auburn out of Georgia. Winya Morris, another big-time 5-star offensive tackle, going to Tennessee. So Tennessee and Alabama both picked up 5-star tackles, 2 5-star tackles. Then Ohio State finally gets on the list here. Zach Harris from Ohio. Not a surprise he signs with in-state Ohio State. John Emery, the number 1 running back, signed with LSU. That was old news. Devontae Dobbs out of Michigan, offensive tackle, 5-star offensive tackle, signed with Michigan State. Daxton Hill from Tulsa, Oklahoma, was at one time committed to Michigan, then Alabama, and then on the early signing period signed with Michigan. Back with Michigan, 5-star safety. Clay Webb, offensive, he's a center out of Oxford, Alabama, goes to Georgia. He signed with Georgia. Logan Brown out of Michigan, 4-star offensive tackle. This is all according to ESPN. Obviously, I know there's discrepancy, but we'll just use ESPN because it's general. Most people kind of pay attention to ESPN. Signed with Wisconsin. They always have good offensive tackles. He looks to be another one in that long list. Number 2 running back by ESPN, Trey Sanders, signed with Alabama. Not a surprise. Top running back goes to Alabama. He made a lot of waves by saying he was going to win the Heisman Trophy as a freshman at Alabama. Jumping the gun a little bit there. He should get some playing time with Josh Jacobs jumping to the NFL and not staying in Alabama. But Sanders, he should get on the field some this season as a freshman. Most big-time running backs do. You got Garrett Wilson, Texas. Ohio State always seems to dip into the state of Texas and get some good players. They got another one in a 4-star wide receiver, Garrett Wilson, going to Ohio State. Derek Stingley Jr., out of Baton Rouge. No surprise where he signed. LSU Tigers. Jerion Ely was a one-time committed to Ole Miss, decommitted on National Signing Day. He signed back with Ole Miss. Great 2-sport athlete. There's a possibility that he's going to see where he's drafted. He's supposed to be a first-round draft pick in the MLB draft in June. So there's still a chance he could not even show up at Ole Miss. But big get for the Ole Miss Rebels. But like I said, he could jump ship and go to Major League Baseball. Zach Pickens, defensive end, South Carolina. They got a top 20 player out of Anderson, South Carolina, so they kept him at home. But he goes to South Carolina. Wisconsin, they got a high-profile quarterback, Graham Merritt's. I believe he's the first running back listed here. He is the first running back, pocket passing running back. He picked the Wisconsin Badgers out of Kansas, so it'll be interesting to see if he can get some playing time early. We don't know Wisconsin for being a great throwing team. It's all about running the ball. Jonathan Taylor's a beast, but it's always been about running the ball for Wisconsin. It's never been about throwing the ball, but we'll see now that they have a top number 1 quarterback. Brandon Smith out of Virginia, he signed with the Penn State Nittany Lions, and then Auburn keeps in-state quarterback Bo Nix out of Pinson. He went to Pinson Valley High School out of Pinson, Alabama. Auburn, they signed a top quarterback with Jarrett Stidham going out. He has a very real possibility of playing right away for the Auburn Tigers. Nakobe Dean signs with Georgia out of Mississippi. And then the last one I'll cover here, Michael Wright. I assume that's how you say that. Out of California, signed with the Oregon Ducks. But as far as team rankings, obviously uh, I can't like open all of them up. But we'll just go. We'll go through the top 25 or so here. Alabama, it's not a surprise. Number one recruiting class. We've become accustomed to saying that, except for last year when Georgia took that from them. Georgia had more 5 stars again this year, but Alabama signed more players, and most of them were 4 stars, and they grabbed a couple 5 stars as well in those offensive tackles. I believe Trey Sanders, the running back, was a 5 star as well. But obviously, it changes with whatever service you go by. But Alabama was number one on here in 24/7 Sports. I believe Rivals is the only one that didn't have Alabama number one. They had Georgia over Alabama, but uh, they didn't fall far last year, and they jumped back up and grabbed the title as top recruiting class. But Alabama was one, Georgia was two, no surprise. A&M, huge recruiting class for Jimbo Fisher and the Aggies. They come in at 3. Oklahoma, never really heard anybody talk much about Oklahoma through the whole process, but they're at number 4. They're right there. They're locked and loaded. They got Jalen Hurts. They got Spencer Rattler, one of the top quarterbacks in the class. I think he's the number 1 dual threat, I believe. They grabbed some great wide receivers, the number 1 overall wide receiver at that. So Oklahoma, they should be right back in the mix for a playoff spot next year. Texas at 5. They cracked the top 5. Tom Herman, good recruiting class. They beat Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. Making claims themselves that Texas is back, specifically the quarterback. But a lot of hype will be around Texas next year. A lot of people will be, I could say probably a little overhyped because of what they did in the Sugar Bowl, but we'll just have to wait till next year to see what happens. Oregon, with one of their best classes ever, comes in at number 6. See if I can make this zoom in. Oh yeah, that's not zoomed in. My bad. And then we've had a lot of names that we're used to being high in recruiting. LSU coming in at 7. No surprise there in the top 10 as always. Michigan, they check in at 8. They've had great recruiting under Harbaugh. No surprise that they're there. Florida, they were probably the biggest mover on National Signing Day. They stole a recruit from Alabama. Flipped a recruit from Alabama. Defensive end, I believe it was. 4-star defensive end. And they grabbed a couple other guys. So big recruiting class for the Florida Gators. They look to dethrone Georgia or Alabama. They look to dethrone Georgia in the East first off, and then possibly Alabama in the SEC championship or whoever comes out of the West. But you get what I'm saying. It runs through Georgia and Alabama right now in the SEC. Next, you got the national champs, Clemson, coming in at 10. They're top 10 every year. They're never the flashy number 1 class, but Dabo knows who he wants, usually gets who he wants for the most part, and they know what they're doing at Clemson. A top 10 class, you can't complain. Tennessee was actually the biggest mover on signing day. They signed 5-star, depending on what you're looking at. They signed a top 5 linebacker out of California, Henry Tutu, I believe is how you say it, and then obviously Darnell Wright, I believe his name was, out of West Virginia. So huge day for Tennessee. They check in at 11. Auburn comes in at 12. One of their big gets on National Signing Day, the day after he signed with Auburn, he signed into a community college. So I guess he didn't qualify to go D1 yet, so he had to go to the junior college route, which is highly unfortunate for Auburn because he could have been an instant impact player, but they lost out on him. Penn State fell on National Signing Day. They made almost no noise whatsoever. But they checked in at 13. Notre Dame picked up a 4-star wide receiver on signing day, but they still fell 4 spots and checking at 14. Washington held pat at 15. Ohio State dropped to 16. Alabama had flipped a player from them, and a bit underwhelming for Ohio State, but with transition with the coaching, obviously with Urban Meyer retiring, some kids backed out or chose to go other places. South Carolina, They were interesting at 17. They had a top 20 player. They signed one of the bigger quarterback recruits in the country out of California. So South Carolina checked in at 17. Nebraska, a strong first overall recruiting class for Scott Frost for Nebraska. They got 25 signees. They check in at 18. Florida State somehow checked in at 19. They're still getting some recruits, I believe, off the notoriety of how good they were under Jimbo, but it's a dumpster fire right now. They didn't pick up a quarterback recruit. DeAndre Francois got dismissed from the team for a domestic violence issue, and they signed no quarterback. But Taggart has a plan, he says. That team was a dumpster fire last year. It looks to continue that next year, I believe, but we'll just have to wait and see. USC at 20, surprisingly low for USC, but until they get a bigger name, I believe, a more vocal, more out in the public, a more established head coach, I believe USC's that might be where they are, but they check in at 20. Stanford at 21. Ole Miss with their signing of Ely. Ole Miss had a good class. They did good. They come in at 22. Arkansas, Chad Morris, his first full recruiting cycle with the Razorbacks. They come in at 23. Mississippi State checks in at 24. Joe Moorhead. Mississippi State looks to continue their run of success. They've been very good over the last several years, last 10 years, and they look to continue that. Not very good, but good for Mississippi State. 8-9 wins a season is great for them, which they're looking for more, which could happen, but we'll just have to wait and see until when football season gets back, and then Purdue checks in at 25. But no surprise, Alabama number 1 again. Nobody really expected anything less. But the Alabama Crimson Tide check in at number 1 with Georgia at 2. We'll move on. We'll move over to baseball. So, some things have been going on in baseball here lately. A lot of people have been, obviously, JT Realmuto. The Marlins have been trying to trade him since last season, but that finally happened. They sent him to the Philadelphia Phillies. But the Marlins continue that sad tradition. They continue their slide to go back to a rebuild, but the Marlins are in a sad state. But the Phillies sent the Marlins catcher and 2 pitching prospects and an international bonus pick, place to pick up a new player yesterday. But the Marlins have been trying to move him since the beginning of last season. They tried to completely just throw out everybody. They've tried to completely throw out everybody and just restart fresh. It's pretty much what that team has done. But the Marlins finally moved Realmuto, however you want to say it. They're still in the market. I know the Phillies are still in the market for Machado. That was one of the teams that really pushed to get him. But Muto just adds another great player to the Phillies, a team that was very surprising last year. And they just got an all-star catcher, and they still have the possibility of picking up Machado. So, Phillies making good moves. Marlins finally continue their fall to even they somehow get more laughable, it seems. We'll see if they can set a record for losses this season. But that's all I wanted to say about that trade. But there's rule changes possibly coming. So the possible rule changes for baseball. Universal designated hitter. It's something that people have called for. It's the only league in baseball, whether it's a little league, high school, whatever, that requires the pitcher to hit, and that's the National League. But they're discussing the possibility of having, They're discussing the possibility of having a universal DH, designated hitter, so pitchers don't have to bat anymore. That one's pretty much self-explanatory. But they have another rule that's basically the three batter minimum. So they're trying to require pitchers to face a minimum of three batters. So you have people that come in to throw one pitch to get one guy out, and they pull him, and then you got to wait for another guy to come out and warm up on the mound, and then he faces one batter, and then they pull him and put another guy, and you have to wait on that guy to warm up on the mound. But uh, baseball's trying to speed up the game because some of these games are running way over, way slower because of pitching changes and things of that sort. So they're discussing trying to speed up the pace of play by adding a three batter minimum, which I'm a fan of that rule because watching a game on TV, I feel like they lose a lot of viewership because sometimes I'll flip a game on and there will be a guy pitching and they would just come back from a commercial break. The guy pitches one pitch, two pitches, gets the one guy out, whatever. They immediately go to another commercial break because of another pitching change. Flip the game off. Don't pay attention anymore. I mean, that's not the only reason I'm a fan of it, but it just sounds better to me. I don't know how to explain it any more than that. It makes them work a little harder. Makes people work a little harder if they have to face a minimum of three batters. But like I said, I'm a fan of that rule, and MLB wants to do it based on pace of play. That's the main reason that they want to do a three batter minimum. But like I said, I'm a fan. I'd prefer it. It'd be interesting to see some of these guys have to come in and face a heated situation and be required to face three more batters. It would just make it more interesting. But like I said, it's just a possible rule change, something in discussions, and obviously the universal DH rule is the other one that they're discussing. But like I said, those are just discussions. They're not anything set in stone for sure going to happen. We'll move on to the last topic of the in the news part here. I wanted to talk about the XFL. Bob Stoops is back into coaching. He obviously we all know him from his days at Oklahoma and his days of trying to troll the SEC. But he will coach in the XFL. He'll coach the Dallas team. I think he's president as well. Our general manager, is returning to coaching as the head coach and general manager of the Dallas-based franchise in the new XFL league. I'm kind of surprised it's the XFL that he's going to coach in, but they must be offering a lot of money on the table to get him to do that. And as he said himself, at first thought it probably wouldn't be for him. That's my thought exactly. He ruled at Oklahoma for years. Was great for the Oklahoma Sooners. Brought in Lincoln Riley, who is now the head coach there. He retired at 58 in June of 2017, so it'll be 2 years ago this year that he retired. But the XFL doesn't start until the spring of 2020, and then we'll have to compete with the new AAF, Alliance of American Football League, that does start this weekend, which I'll talk about that in a second, which I did the other day, but I'll talk about it again for a few moments. But Bob Stoops is back into coaching. I really didn't think this would be where he would come back to coaching. Was thinking more of the college level, but also I never really saw him wearing anything but OU. Nothing but the Oklahoma Sooners logos. But it's official. He will be a coach in the XFL. But as far as tonight goes, I'll go ahead and talk about some NBA. The games for tonight, the standings as they currently are. They haven't changed much since the other day, since the last time I talked to you, but since it has been 3 days, I'll go ahead and go through those. So you still have the Milwaukee Bucks in the one spot, a game and a half up of Toronto. They both have 40 wins, but Toronto's played 3 more games and in those 3 more games, they've lost 3 more games. So they're at 40-16, but the Bucks are in the 1 seed at 40-13. The Indiana Pacers jump back up to the 3 spot at 3-19, but they're 5 games back of the Bucks. 36-19, 3-19, 36-19. Boston is the 4. They're a game behind the Pacers, 6 games back of the division or conference lead at 35-20. And the 76ers, they're down to the 5 spot now. Those 3 just keep bouncing around from 3 to 5. It'll probably be that way all the way through for those 3 teams. But the Sixers are the 5 spot right now at 34-20. They're 6.5 back of the 1 spot and a half game back of the Celtics. The Nets, they still hold in at the 6th spot at 29-27. They're 12.5 out of the 1 seed, but they are the current 6 seed, are in the 6th spot. The Hornets are the 7 at 26-28. Very typical of the Eastern Conference to have teams with losing records be in the playoff discussion or in the playoffs. But the Hornets, they are currently in the 7th spot, 2.5 back of the Nets. And then Miami currently holds the last spot, the 8th seed. As we move towards the All-Star break at 25-27. Or no, yeah, 25-27, and they are tied with the Hornets at 14.5 back. But they've obviously played 2 less games than the Hornets, so that's why their records match up. The Pistons, they're currently a game and a half back of the Heat at 24-29. Orlando, they just made the trade for Markelle Fultz, like I said earlier. And they are 3.5 back of Miami Heat for the 8th spot. The Wizards, who lost John Wall for 12 months and probably all of last season, are at 22-32. They're 18.5 back of the 1 spot of the Bucks, and they're 4 back of Miami Heat. The Hawks sit at 18-36. Then you have the Bulls at 12-42. The Cavaliers at 11-43. And then the worst team in the entire NBA, the New York Knicks, at 10-43. Over to the Western Conference, Golden State has now jumped back into the 1 spot over the Denver Nuggets. The Nuggets are in the 2, a game and a half back of the Warriors. The Thunder, they still sit at 3 in the Western Conference at 35-19. They're 2 games back of the Nuggets, 3.5 behind the Warriors. And the Trailblazers still sit at 4, 5.5 back of the Warriors, just 2 back of the Thunder for the 3, but the Trailblazers are the 4. The Rockets have moved up to the 5 at 32-22. They're 6.5 back of the Warriors and a game back of the Blazers for the 4 spot. The Utah Jazz, they're at 6, 31-24. The 7 spot's the Spurs. These teams just keep trading. The Spurs were at the 5 the other day. These teams just keep bouncing around, but the Spurs are the 7 seed. Tell me the last time you heard that. They're not exactly what they used to be, but it's still Popovich. They still know how to play basketball. So I'd expect them to still make the playoffs, but they currently sit at the 7 spot at 32-25. And the LA Clippers currently hold the last spot in the West at 30-26. The Sacramento Kings come in the 9 spot behind the Clippers. They just made that trade for Harrison Barnes, like I said. They're a game back of the Clippers for the 8th spot. Next comes the LA Lakers at 28-27. They are a game and a half back of the Clippers. The Mavs, they made quite a few moves this trade deadline. They sit at 25-28. And they are 3.5 back of the Clippers. So they still obviously have a very good chance making a run for the playoffs. The Timberwolves sit at 25-29. The Pelicans failed to move Anthony Davis. They wanted more. I think they had unrealistic expectations because they didn't want to move him, which I wouldn't want to move him either. But they sit at 24-31. The Grizzlies, they traded away basically all their role players. Marc Gasol, they kept Conley. That was pretty much it. So they pretty much threw in the towel. They're at 22-34. And then by far the worst team in the Western Conference, the Phoenix Suns, they sit at 11-45. So I know I talked about this the other day. I'll move on to the AAF, the Alliance of American Football. So I'll just leave the TV blank for this. Um, but opening night for the Alliance of American Football is Saturday night. Tomorrow night, both games at 8 Eastern. CBS will be covering those. Um, it's just fun to have another league. This league's got more behind it than leagues have had in the past, in my opinion. And it's got former execs, NFL execs, everybody uh, involved knows what they're doing. Um, but yeah, both games on Saturday will be at 8 Eastern and CBS. I guess it depends on where you are locally for which game they'll be playing. But the first game, Atlanta at Orlando, which will probably be the one I get here in the Southeast region, will be able to watch is Atlanta at Orlando, and then you have San Diego at San Antonio, both on Saturday night, 8 p.m. Eastern on CBS. And then Sunday we have the four other teams playing. You have the Memphis Express at the Birmingham Iron at 4 p.m. Eastern time. That'll be on CBS Sports Network. And then the nightcap for Sunday night is Salt Lake at Arizona, 8 p.m. Eastern on the NFL Network. So it's great to see so many people get involved with it, I should say. Bleacher Report Live is carrying it. The NFL Network is investing into it by carrying the games. CBS, they obviously got the rights from the beginning to carry the games. But it's going to be a lot of fun. It's interesting to see a new football league. Like I said, this one's got more behind it than some of them in the past have. The XFL made a big splash. They had the NBC made a big splash, but a lot of problems with player health and just the way it wasn't planned out very well. It lasted the one season, the very first skirmish, scuffle, whatever they called it, for the ball to start. A guy got hurt on the very first one. It saw some success, but it was set up to fail, it seemed. It just didn't last. But I'm ready for the AAF. A bunch of former players in your area, college players. There's a bunch of former college players. It's regionally based, so like here, Trent Richardson is playing on the Iron. Blake Sims played at Alabama. He's playing on the Birmingham Iron. Chris Davis, I said all this the other day. Chris Davis, he played at Auburn. The guy known for returning a kick six. He's on the Birmingham Iron team. The only thing, Birmingham happened to draft Blake Sims, or pick up Blake Sims, but the only thing that's not regionally based is the quarterbacks. They can be drafted by any team and go anywhere. Other than that, the players are required to stay in that region where they might have a name. It's to help boost attendance, help boost around the team, to get people involved, to get people to want to show up, those kind of things. But obviously, some big name coaches. Steve Spurrier is back. Michael Vick is the offensive coordinator for the Atlanta team. Just it's got more behind it. It's basically going to end up being a minor leagues for the NFL. They can leave at any time to go join an NFL team. But it's just exciting to have more football. Yes, it's not the NFL. Yes, it's not college football. I don't think it's going to be on the level of that, but it's intriguing. I believe they'll have plenty of exposure. They'll have plenty of people interested in seeing what's going on with the league. And then they will have a competitor themselves next spring in the spring of 2020 when the XFL launches. Like I just talked about, Bob Stoops has been officially named the head coach and general manager for that team in Dallas. But it's always interesting seeing these new leagues start. A lot have come and gone. A lot have failed. Not many really succeeded at all. Obviously, there's one that stands alone in the NFL as far as professional football. And I'm not even getting into the arena leagues because that collapsed at one time as well. So the AAF starts this weekend. But that's where I'll leave. That's where I'll leave off today. I know I didn't quite make it an hour. I'm at just about 55 minutes. But I'll go ahead and leave it there. for today. I'll quit buzzing in your ear if you're listening to me. But like I said, this will be uploaded to YouTube. I'll probably remind you guys of that every time this will be uploaded to YouTube if you missed the whole thing. I will be chopping up some of the topics in this video to be specific videos on its own and on YouTube as well. But go ahead and leave a like here. Go ahead and subscribe. Go over to the YouTube, subscribe to the YouTube, share the content over there as well. But it's been fun talking to you guys on this Friday. I'll be back on Monday. Hopefully a lot goes on this weekend that we can talk about in that Monday hour. But I appreciate you coming out. I look forward to seeing you guys next week.